Hey there. A few months ago, DJ and I hosted a special webinar with Dr. Robert Cialdini, the best-selling author of the book Influence. But we didn't just discuss influence. We explored how to apply it to e-commerce. The webinar was so good that we actually turned it into a 3-part podcast series. First up, online persuasion that works. Let's dive in.
Behavioral design is the process of structuring, that is, designing messages and images that include underlying principles of behavior, of persuasion, that move people in our directions, that cause them to be more likely to say yes, to lend assent, to make a decision or a choice in our favor. Now, that goal is fostered by the principles of influence that I cover in my book, Influence. There are 7 of them, and they're designed to increase the likelihood of assent to our messages by including one or another of these 7 principles into your message. The principles are reciprocation, liking, unity, commitment and consistency, scarcity. But the 2 that we're going to focus on, especially today, are authority and social proof, because those are the principles that are most related to reputation management. And that's an overarching context for this webinar.
So moving on, Bob, you wrote the book Pre-Suasion, which is another wonderful book. And if you haven't read that, that's a great asset. But can you explain the principles and how they work to ethically influence decision-making through the process of persuasion?
What I said about the book Influence itself is that we have these 7 principles that research shows, if they are included in a message, significantly increases the likelihood that people will agree with your offer or your persuasive appeal. Persuasion is different. It doesn't involve what you put into your message, the principles you put there. It involves how you place those principles before the message is even delivered in order to influence people's receptivity to the message they haven't yet encountered. It sounds like magic. How do you get people to be receptive to your message before they've even encountered it, before they know what's in it? How would you do that? It's not magic. It's solid science. There's evidence that shows that if you can arrange for people to experience one or another of these principles of influence that drive their behavior before they experience a message that includes that principle, they will have been readied for it in a very favorable way. They will have been primed to be open to the message, to process it more deeply, and to follow it more fully. So that's the key. It moves people by arranging for them to be sympathetic to your core features before they even experience them, before you deliver your message itself.
So in your book, you talk about sequence, you talk about context, environment. How do you think that plays out in terms of an online search environment? You're in Google, you're looking for a product or a brand or a solution, the answer to a question, and you have environment, you have context. How does persuasion work within that environment?
So a perfect example is what you see about that organization, about that product or service online in various kinds of sites, star ratings and evaluations and Q&A options and so on that you might have before you even decide to move into an exploration of the merits of that case. You arrange for people's minds to be attuned with the true principles of influence that might be warranted in that situation so that they've been readied for it. That's the key, to make them sympathetic to the message before it's delivered, so they're more open to the idea in the first place.
So would it be fair to say then, Bob, that persuasion is essentially pre-framing by creating the optimal environment, context, and sequence for ethical influence to take place in the secondary and tertiary touch points or contacts?
Exactly. I mean, when I first wrote my book, Influence, I infiltrated a lot of different influence programs, sales programs, marketing, advertising, public relations, and so on. And I noticed that the top scorers were not those who spent the majority of their time structuring the message that they were delivering. They did that, of course. But what separated them was what they did before they delivered that message, to put at top of consciousness of the audience members the features, the principles that they were going to touch on subsequently. That is what differentiated them from their inferior counterparts, actually. Well, I can give you a couple of examples of how this works. And for example, trust is one of the things that if that's there first, that's an enormously powerful persuasive asset to change. There's a study that showed, for example, that the single trait that people most want to see in their interactions with others, their various relationships, can be business relationships, it can be friendships, it can be romantic relationships, it can be relationships with a neighbor. They want trustworthiness first. The most thing that they want is trustworthiness. So if we can arrange for them to have trust in what we are going to present before we present it, we have already a big step forward in moving people in that direction. I can give you an example. So, for example, a few years ago, Norwegian Cruise Line had a special program, a holiday sale, where any of their previous cruise visitors, the customers, were given a special discount on any cruise during that holiday season, the end of the year holiday season, but it had a limited time. And when you went into the email that everybody received, there was a ticking down clock, a digital clock, as to how quickly you could move in to the, or how quickly you needed to move in before the offer disappeared. Half of the people got that email just like that. The others got in the subject line of the email 2 ticking down clock emojis. They were put in mind of the limited availability, the dwindling opportunity of this. In other words, the principle of scarcity. They got 15% more cruises, more sales, if there were ticking clock emojis in the subject line that persuaded people to be focused on limited availability and dwindling availability. That's the sort of thing that can occur online simply. It's costless and it works. The reason it works, there is other research that shows that when you have been focused on a topic like this, let's say scarcity of opportunity, it becomes more important. It elevates your priorities about the concept of moving quickly and getting something that's scarce or rare or dwindling in availability. So that's how it works. It's also why it works, by elevating that principle that you have, that you're about to present, in mind in terms of its import, in terms of its priority, so that when people then encounter it, they have been readied to spend special time and attention on it.
Love that summary and those examples. Those are great and very visual. One can really see how those examples of limited supply, limited time, urgency, motivation, combined with trust, really does drive more conversions, more engagements, more revenue, ethically. So thank you very much for that. We're now going to talk a little bit about moving into the next subject, which is what is reputation management? Because now we've created the context of persuasion, and persuasion is essentially a subset of reputation management. So our definition of online reputation management is closely related to both persuasion and influence. So taking both of your books, Persuasion and Influence, you get reputation management. Because creating and managing your reputation is the process of pre-framing how your brand is seen and perceived at every touch point. So in our world, that means displaying your ratings and reviews across the web, not only on your website, but on all the relevant open review platforms and in paid and organic search results. It also means owning as many of the top search results as possible and being seen by your audience as a helpful, trustworthy brand. So that's our interpretation or definition of online reputation management. And that's really how we went about writing our book, Reputation King, based on that premise. That would be a real high-level summary of conceptually what we're trying to do with our strategies on Reputation King and the website reputationking.com. So now we're going to flip it over to Scott, and Scott's going to talk about what does online persuasion look like.
Awesome. Thanks, DJ. So this is really exciting because we're combining the principles and teachings that we've learned from Dr. Cialdini over almost 40 years, right? Since you wrote your first book. And it's all still just as timely today as it was when you first wrote it.
Scott, some people ask me, your book, Influence, is sometimes called the Bible of online marketing, but you wrote it before there was online marketing. How could you look forward and foresee its impact on a platform that didn't exist? And I always have to say, I didn't look ahead. I looked inside. I looked at the factors that have always driven behavior change and choice, no matter what platform, throughout our history as a species. So the platforms can change, but these principles won't, and they will continue to drive ascent wherever we locate them.
Thanks for that insight. I love that it does work for online because that's why we have a business, right? Because of the principles that you teach. And one of the great things about doing this webinar is we get to learn from you and pull in all of those principles from Influence and Pre-Suasion. But because DJ and I work on the front lines every day, and we've been doing this for almost 2 decades, we actually get to show you what it looks like in the real world. So it's pretty cool, the two worlds coming together. So
what I love about it is that you are data people. You have evidence. You have scientifically derived evidence, not just anecdotes and recommendations that come off out of the top of your head or someplace lower.
Right. So let's jump in here. So the first thing I want to show you, this is one of our clients, and they're a large client. If I said their name, you would know exactly who they are, but they've collected over 1.5 million reviews with Shopper Approved. But when you do a search online for their brand, it's a mixed bag, right? You can see that they have different reviews and different number of ratings online. So what that does is when somebody goes online to see if this brand is trustworthy, they come up with this average calculation in their head, and it's probably around a 3 to a 3.2. And their confidence in the brand is mixed, and their probability of buying is low, right? So this is an example of how not to be persuaded to buy something. So show the next one. So this is also a Shopper Approved client. Now, they use a tool that we created called Review Destinations, where we actually, once a customer buys, we send the customer to different review platforms to leave their review. Now, what that does is that normalizes their reputation across the web in an ethical way. And so you can see here, if I'm a client or a customer and I go searching for this product online or this company, I'm going to see a normalized reputation across the web, which increases the trust that I have in that brand. And so my perception of that brand, if I averaged all those reviews out of my head, is probably going to be around a 4.6. My confidence in the brand is going to be very high, and the probability of me buying from that brand is very high before I go to the website, which is all about persuasion before I get to the site and I'm persuaded to buy it. So this is another one of our clients, and I wanted to show you a real current life example here. So this is from March of 2023. This is a $2.3 billion company, and they came to us and they're like, okay, we have a really bad rating on Trustpilot, 1.3. We're like, okay, we can help you with that. Let's plug you into our tool And let's send some of your clients to leave a review on Trustpilot after they buy. So within 6 or 7 months, I think it was April to November, we sent some of their clients after they bought to Trustpilot to leave a review. And their ratings went from 1.3 to 4.1. So they went from one of the lowest rated companies in their industry to the highest rated company in their industry on Trustpilot in just a matter of a few months. And I mean, can you just imagine if you went there to search this company in March of 2023 to today, which actually this slide is outdated. It's now a 4.2. So your trust and your confidence in that brand is going to go up considerably. And this is what it looks like if you did a search in Google. We wanted to kind of give you a picture of if you're doing a search, you're going to see something like this, right? So this is different review platforms showing between 4.5 and 4.8 stars. But this is what happens when you send your customers to different review platforms after they buy. And the reason this is important is because what we found is consumers triangulate your reputation online.
I just wanted to mention too, Scott, that it's been studied and statistically quantified that the ideal review rating is between 4.1 and 4.7. That's why it's important that we get that previous client at least to a 4.1. Consumers don't really trust brands with a 5-star rating across the web. They assume it's going to be gamed, manipulated, fake. So 4.7 at the high end, 4.1 at the low end is pretty much that sweet spot.
Yeah. Well, and I should also point out that these are completely 100% ethical ratings and reviews from actual customers that have made a purchase from a brand and were just invited to leave a review. There's no incentives or anything, and they can rate whatever they want, whatever their experience is, right? Okay, so what we did, we love doing surveys to consumers. And so we asked consumers, because we wanted to know how important persuasion was and if people triangulate a company's reputation before they buy. So we asked some questions and we sent out a survey. So the first one was, when researching a company online, do you check ratings and reviews on multiple review sites? Well, 66% or 2/3 of online consumers say yes. That's important. If you're an online merchant, you need to know that, because if you have bad ratings on some of the review platforms out there, you're in trouble. You're going to be like company A that I showed, right? That had the mixed bag. So then we asked, well, if a company has a good overall rating on one site, but a bad overall rating on another one, which one do you trust, right? Is the glass half empty or half full? So we were pleasantly surprised to find that people give companies the benefit of the doubt if there's two platforms, right? So 69%. And so then we asked, well, what happens if they have a good rating on one site, but a bad rating on two sites? So what happened is it flipped, right? So if you have two sites with bad ratings and one with good, 2/3 are going to give the negative reviews the benefit of the doubt. And that goes to social proof, which we'll talk a little bit more about.
I want to point out too that this study had a 98% confidence factor. So very statistically significant, not a small sample size.
All right. So I wanted to show you some real examples of persuasion with ratings and reviews. So now we're going to switch to a different modality. We're going to talk about Q&A. So when it comes to Q&A, we wanted to see what consumers thought was important, especially in search. So this is another survey we did. And we asked, would a website that answered your questions and showed up at the top of Google search results increase the perceived credibility of that website? And 80% said yes. So then we asked, if you asked a product question in Google and the answer came up at the top of the search results, how likely are you to visit that website? Because there's a difference between just thinking that's a trusted answer and actually going to the site. So 73% said they were highly or extremely likely to go and visit that website. And that makes sense. This is actually a chart from Backlinko. They did a study with looking at millions of search results online, and they found that 69.1% of the clicks go to the top 5 search listings, right? Which then goes back to that pillar of persuasion, why it's so important to get as many listings as you can in the top of the search results. because people trust listings that are listed at the top of Google, because Google only shows the most trusted sites at the top.
Thanks, Scott. That was a great example of what that looks like and why it's so important to be in the top of the search results. Now we're going to talk about what persuasion examples actually look like online. So there's three principles here. We call it the persuasion power play. Principle one is you want to get at the top search positions. As you saw in that last graph, the top 5 get 69% of the clicks. So obviously you want to be as high as possible. Principle 2 is you want to get as many listings as possible on page 1, preferably as many as you can in the top 5 positions. So for example, you could get a paid, you could get an organic, or a paid and a featured snippet, or a people also ask, or a paid and a position 2 or 3 organic, or shopping, etc. And principle 3 is, depending on the search query, if, for example, they're looking for brand reviews or product reviews, you want to make sure that those search results include the review stars in those listings, because again, that's social proof and persuasion. So this is an example, and we're calling this new because this is fairly new for us to be able to send review stars for both seller ratings and product reviews to Bing. We've always been able to do it for Google, but we're one of 2 in the world that can do this for Bing and Google at the same time. So there's your seller ratings showing up in the ads. This is a organic listing, which is powered by the Shopper Approved Review Certificate, which is a search optimized microsite for every client where their seller ratings, product reviews, and video reviews are housed. And then those are fed into the organic and paid search results. This is a wonderful example of a Google Shopping listing. And what you see here is a combination of product reviews and seller ratings. The top quality store icon there is from Google. That's a Google top quality store logo. And that comes from meeting several Google criteria, one of which, and probably the most important, is collecting enough quality rankings for your store through a Google review partner. So really what you have here is 3 trust signals. You have the seller ratings, you have the product reviews, and you have the Google top quality store ranking. This is a fun example. This is really a niche product for a niche audience, and it's an automatic gate opener for rural farmers, et cetera. And this top video review started with 284 reviews, but now it has 573 reviews in just a year. The second one from Dennis had 348 views in 4 months and now has 1,000. So collectively, they have almost 1,600 views in a year for a super niche product in a super niche market. It just goes to show you that video reviews do very, very well in terms of search engine optimization, engagement, and clicks. And this is another way to obviously capture those top search positions.
The cool thing about that, DJ, is that top video is just this random farmer guy,
Really
he's
random.
got his plaid shirt on, he's got a big bushy beard, and hundreds of people have watched that video and saw him put up this gate thing
Opener.
But he's their client, and he's showing them how much he likes their product. I mean, that's the best type of persuasion you can have.
Yeah, absolutely. The videos are very, very convincing, very engaging. This is a new product, and this is AI-assisted Q&A. It's also automatically search optimized Q&A. So this allows you to use AI to automatically recommend new questions and answers from the content on your product pages, your Google Search Console, and marketplaces selling the same product, allowing you to scale a lot of content very quickly, very easily, obviously through the assistance of artificial intelligence, which is then automatically optimized for search results, oftentimes hitting that featured snippet position or the top 3 organic search results. This is an example of a client that's using this tool. And as you can see here, there's a very long tail, bottom funnel, high purchase intent, very specific search query. How long will an Olympian heater run on a 20-pound propane tank? You can't get more specific than that. So here's the answer from the client showing up in that featured snippet. And this client has said that when people use the Q&A tool and engage with the Q&A tool, they convert an average of 75%, which is amazing because the average product page converts at 7%. Amazon Prime members convert at 74%. So it's really a very, very high conversion rate, obviously. This is an example of our own website. We use the Q&A tool ourselves. As you can see here, we've captured the featured snippet with the question and answer, and the people also ask with a different variant. So many times you can get 1 or 2, sometimes even 3 positions on page 1 for the same question.